that around, and I'd like to genuinely ask you, what do men want?
Nobody deals with any of the really valid issues. And then you get a bunch of anger, and you get a bunch...
She said, oh, I'm going to go do a sweat lodge this evening. And I begged her to take me along, and that was about 6 years ago.
Welcome to Speaking of Men. This is public access television for Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm your host, Mike Rivas. Our guest today is Jim Sims, a psychotherapist in private practice, and we'll be talking about men and aggression. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome to Speaking of Men. I'm your host, Mike Rivas. This is public access television for Albuquerque, New Mexico. Thank you for joining us today. Our guest is James Sims, and Jim is a psychotherapist in private practice here in New Mexico. And he's been doing some workshops on assertive behavior for men and women. And we're going to talk about those workshops and how they tie into men and aggression and some of the behaviors that control us and run us and kind of tear up our ability to communicate and be more loving and intimate with one another. Welcome, Jimmy.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm fine. Thanks
Good.
for asking.
I'm
me.
fine too.
Why don't we kick this thing off and give us a little bit of the definition of what assertiveness training is about, and give us. You told me there's a difference between aggressive behavior, assertiveness, and passive behavior, and talk about that a little bit and what the workshops are.
Okay, basically, what we're talking about is behaviors. We're talking about types of behaviors that are learned behaviors. Those behaviors are coping behaviors. And what we're talking about is passive behavior, assertive behavior, and aggressive behavior. Traditionally, the passive behavior has been associated with women. And the aggressive behavior is associated with men. Simply put, passive behavior means, basically it means that you're okay, I'm not okay.
That's one down. This is passive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Aggressive behavior means I'm okay, you're not. Assertive behavior means I'm okay, you're okay.
Okay.
And what I've been working with in the groups that I've been working with is primarily been with women who are emotionally beat up, who have been down, who have been either physically abused or emotionally abused or both, and learning to be assertive is kind of a step up for them. Basically, they're learning to take care of themselves. You were talking about the groups for men. There haven't been any assertive groups for men. I don't think that men see their aggressive behavior as unhealthy. I think that they see aggressive behaviors as kind of a one-up thing, kind of a they're going to win, and that's what they want to do. They see assertiveness as stepping down. They don't see assertiveness as taking care of themselves.
Right. So what we're talking about is scripts, and a lot of women are handed that passive script of being one down. And we as men just naturally have that competitive thing, especially in America, handed to us, and being one up with other males and being the winner in situations, and it ties into competition. As I understand it, you were telling me that some of the problem is we men don't therefore have the ability to work problems out because they're in aggression all the time. Is that right? Or
I think that men get so caught up in competitiveness. Mm-hmm. A lot of that, the competitiveness, is, when you start talking about competitiveness, and you start talking about aggression, a lot of the times you're also talking about fear. So whether men are going to, to step down to assertive, to step from aggression back down to assertive, there is somewhere in there they've got to be aware of that they may be afraid. I think men have sometimes have a rough time dealing with their own fear.
Right, and a lot of times this fear comes up in relationships with people, and because they don't have the communication skills to deal with it, they kick into it out of their own fear and inability.
Right.
Let's pause for just a moment and take a quick look at the weekly tip we have from the Parent Craft people. And we'd like you to stay with us for a moment. We'll be right back.
When your child misbehaves, act immediately if possible. Draw your child to you and remain calm. Keep it as short and private as possible. For example, show your disapproval by saying firmly, "It's not okay for you to tease your sister like that."
Welcome back to Speaking of Men. I'm your host, Mike Rivas, and we're speaking with James Sims, or Jim Sims, who's a psychotherapist here in New Mexico, working with assertiveness training for men and women. Jim, why don't you give us a little bit of background on how you became involved in doing these particular workshops?
Well, I had become involved in women's issues back in Denver. I became aware of the Virginia Neal Blues Centers in Denver for women.
The Virginia Neal
Blue Center for Women, which is...
That's her name, Virginia Neal Blue.
Right.
Okay.
It had never occurred to me that women might be one down and that we might be one up. And I wasn't aware of the strengths of women until I went backpacking, and my wife, I weighed 210 pounds and was carrying a 70-pound pack. She weighed 105 pounds and was carrying a 55-pound pack. And I was carrying a third of my weight, and she was carrying half of her weight, and she walked away from me. She just flat walked away from me. And then the other thing is when my son was born, I was there, and I became very, very, very much aware of the strengths of women. When I was in Durango, Colorado, I sponsored the first Center for Women on the Western Slope, and then almost as a fluke, I came down to Santa Fe, was in private practice, and I wanted to run an assertive group because it was really easy for me. So I advertised for it. The only people that showed up for the assertiveness training were women. So I molded or directed or found issues for women, and the issues for women are different issues for women than they are for men. An example. And then from Santa Fe, I came down and I ran some workshops for the city for women, minority women, who were working with other minority women out in the community, and we talked about the differences between being a minority as women versus minority white women, how Hispanic women, their problems differed, and how black women's problem differed, and how they were all pretty much controlled by the males.
By males in each culture.
Right. Well, what we talked about was the fact that the white women were controlled by the white society. the Hispanic women were controlled by the Hispanic society, and the black women were controlled by both. It has to do with economics and jobs and things like that. But primarily,
a lot of your self-esteem in this society comes from your job and your financial worth and that kind of thing.
But basically what we discovered was that the white women were being told by the white men that they were not okay, and that the Hispanic women were being told by the Hispanic males and the white women that they weren't okay. The black women were being told not by the black men that they weren't okay. They were told basically by the white society.
So this is a situation where, and the people telling this isn't something people come out and say. This is all covert stuff.
Yes.
Hidden messages and meetings that come to us through day-to-day life, through images and actions and attitudes. Which we hope we're beginning to change a little bit in America.
Right, and I think that one of the things that needs to be addressed is that a lot of women that are having problems with men or men's issues are not owning up to the fact that they are part of the, and you told me the word the other day, part of the aggressor. That they are, no, it's not aggressor, that white women are one up on most black men. They don't want to own up to that.
You were telling me that,
Right,
I think. Yeah.
right. But that's, the word slips my mind.
Well,
but that's okay.
It's okay, yeah. Well, so what we're basically talking about here is inability to communicate.
Right.
This is you're confronted with a problem. You're not in touch with the person is not in touch with their emotions, and so they get scared because they can't control the situation. And the next thing they do is get pissed and aggressive because they can control the situation and be one up and dominant in there. So one of the things you said to me that I thought was kind of a good illustrator that we might use here, in men especially, is the difference between being rigid and being flexible. Could you talk about that a little bit? Or?
I think we men, we only have the one, a lot of us only have the one coping skill, which is when we get scared, we get angry or aggressive. I think that's programmed into us. If you go to one of the health spas and you watch our young men growing or working on becoming adults, what you'll see them is pumping a lot of iron. They work and they pump and they pump and they pump. And what they do is when they do that is they get really rigid and they break. Right. And I certainly have my aggressive side. I've played rugby for a long time, which is about as aggressive as you can get. But in coaching the young men, I can get them to pump iron, they'll go pump iron, but when I talk to them about being flexible and doing yoga, they are stretching, they have a really rough time with it. I've had one a fine player, he wouldn't work on flexibility, and every time anything would happen, he would break. I don't think that we men are programmed to be flexible.
So are you, from what I'm hearing you say then, this body language that we develop just reflects the emotional language that we're in possession of in here. We're rigid out here, we're rigid in here also.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying is we need to get some flexibility and a little bit of versatility in beginning to deal and getting the skills to deal with social situations.
The other thing,
vulnerability, I guess, that fear of vulnerability.
Yeah. The other thing that we men have a rough time with, and I'm impressed with myself because I was able to do it. This spring, we started backpacking, and the trail was snowed over. And about halfway up, the trail became snowed over. And it was okay for me to say, okay, the trail is snowed over, we can go back. Because when I was a younger man, I couldn't have done that. I'd have said, okay, there's the snow, and I'd have gone.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have made any difference. But I think what we men need to learn to do is we get on a path, our stomachs get upset, and we ignore that. or the hair stands up on the back of our neck and we ignore that, and it's just to hell with everybody.
You know, that's one of the things that is real interesting to me is giving myself permission to leave emotional situations that are bad for me.
Yeah.
You know, that's one of the things that was given to me. You know, you got to stay there no matter what happens. If it kills you, you got to stay.
Okay.
Because if you leave, you know, you lose face and you're a sissy for leaving, you know, and go ahead.
It's really important that, I think it's important for men to know that we need all of the, we need aggressiveness and assertiveness and passive. We need to have those behaviors in our repertoire. There have been a number of bars that I have been in at various times that I needed to be passive just to get out of there alive. I needed to say, yes, sir, I agree totally, and you are right, and you are in charge. Please excuse me, I was wrong, and get out the door. I needed to be passive. I need to have all of those behaviors, and I needed to have the aggressive behavior and the assertive behavior and the passive behavior in my repertoire. I need to be able to do
to
that.
keep breathing.
Rest, right. That's what it's about. That's what it's about, too.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Let's see what else we've got on the. We talked about flexibility versus rigidity. Well, problem solving. What are some of the problems? Can you think of any examples that we would run into day to day? I mean, in a bar situation, getting out and staying alive is a problem. You know, how do I continue to maintain heartbeat here for the next 24 hours?
Yeah, right.
Can you think of any in other situations in life that we come up against that? Or let me say this: how can we begin to generate a little bit better ability to begin to solve problems without kicking into this aggressive thing all the time, without being overwhelmed by any chaos that comes up?
I think one of the things that we need to do is be aware of the fact that we're dealing with relationships, we're dealing with human beings, and so we're going to run into this myriad of situations every day. For me, and for a number of people that I worked with, in order to talk about being assertive, you had to be aware of your own emotions. You had to be aware of, again, the pit of your stomach. Sometimes with me, it's the back of my thighs. Again, sometimes it's the hair standing up on my neck. But I need to be aware of those, what's the word I want to say? The triggers, the things that trigger me off. So that when I'm talking with, say, a mechanic, a car mechanic or someone like that, and he tells me that I need a brake job that I don't think I need, then the minute I lean forward like this, I know I'm almost ready to lose it. And I do lose it. If I do lose it, I lose it because I lose it in two ways. I lose my temper, and I lose it because when I do that, I am one down. I am one down. He is one up. I give him a lot of power when I slip into that aggressive stuff.
So just I know in the men's recovery and struggle to get back in touch, a big part of that is what you're talking about, is that being aware of emotions and overcoming that numbness and just being aware of how we're, you know, our body posture, how we sit physically, the muscular tensions and things. Got any others that, just off the top that you might be able to think of?
Not off the top. I think that, but one of the points I wanted to make is that I really don't believe that men get up every morning and go in and shower and shave and say to themselves, well, who will I be one up on today? Or who am I going to run over today? I don't think we do that. I think that there's a lot of programming that's built into us and built into the family system that sets us up and programs us and trains us to do that.
Yeah, that's that 40,000 hours of tapes Bradshaw talks about that just kicks in. You know, you were mentioning to me that there are some differences in the way men and women communicate. Could you take a couple of minutes and talk about that? I hope you remember that. You remember?
Refresh me.
Well, we were saying that when men talk, they talk about status. Wasn't that you and I?
I don't think
that,
so.
That when men talk to each other, their dialogue seems to have to do with status and hierarchy, and they give each other messages on their accomplishments and the way their standing is in the community. Whereas when women communicate, if there's a group of them and one of them's in trouble, all of them immediately get down to the level of the woman who's in trouble and empathize, and they start from that level there, so that they get a bond right away.
Okay.
As compared to us.
I hear what you're saying. I don't believe that was me. But one of the things that I am impressed about women is the way they can talk. I was sitting in a park in southern Albuquerque, and the sun was going down, and there were about 20 women in pairs walking around, just talking and talking and talking. There weren't any men. There were not pairs of men walking around talking. There was, I think, one man probably with his wife who was walking, but mostly it was just women who were walking around. They seemed to be just talking about their days. What we men lose when we don't do that is in talking about, say, a problem, and saying in a problem, if you and I don't talk about a problem, then I only have my way to look at it. I also miss out on the emotional touching, which I think we all need.
Right. Let's take just a moment and pause. Take a quick look at this message from the Points of Lights people. We're talking with Jim Sims on men and aggression and assertiveness therapy. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
If this doesn't scare you, just wait.
The doctor will see you now.
One night a year ago, Vanessa got high with some guy and forgot everything she learned about preventing AIDS. Now her life is the horror show. AIDS, another way drugs can kill.
Welcome back to Speaking of Men. I'm your host, Mike Rivas. Our guest today is Jim Sims, speaking about assertiveness training. Jim, let's talk a little bit about the importance of assertiveness in the family, and how that affects the younger person in the home. Want to say a few words about
Sure.
it?
If we, as the role model, one of the main figures in the family, if the only coping mechanism or the main coping mechanism that we use in dealing with problems, in dealing with the brakeman, in dealing with our wives, if we get into trouble, if we see we're having difficulties, if that happens, if our main coping mechanism is, I want it done my way now, if we do that enough, then that's one of the reasons why white males, live a shorter period of time than white women, is because of this whole aggression thing.
It's killing us.
It's killing us. So what happens is when I lean up there and do that to you, my son is sitting there watching me. He knows that I'm doing that. I'm taking 4 or 5 years. I am teaching him how to take 4 or 5 years off his life. And the same thing goes for my daughter. If I do that to you, my daughter is learning that that is what men do to women. She will expect it from her husband, and it will be okay. If I am abusing my wife like that, if I am using aggressiveness as my problem-solving tool, she will look for a man. I mean, it will be okay. It will be okay for her to be abused because her father did it to her mother, and she'll accept that. So when we only know aggression, when that is our main problem-solving skill, we're teaching that to our children. we're really hurting our children.
Right. We're also sending a lot of we're creating a lot of resentment and chaos in the world and the relationships around us as
sure.
well, which is a cycle that comes back and comes back. You know, one of the things that I found interesting was an observation in men's recovery, that a lot of women don't realize that men who are abusive to women are also abusive to other men. They're just as detrimental in their relationships with other people they contact, that they come in contact with, as they are in their relationships with women. And you know, the interesting thing for me is that, you know, the destroyer is the destroyer. And one of the things I'm always interested in is looking at empowerment and how we begin to empower one another.
Yeah. One of the other things that was interesting for me in the last 2 weeks, I had a couple of discussions with a very, very, very aggressive woman. And when we got down to it, one of the side effects, and I realize that we men do it too, but an aggressive man or an aggressive woman, they're rude and they hurt people. And it really doesn't make any difference whether they're a man or they're a woman, and we both can do it. Both sexes can do it.
Sure, sure. Anything, we're down to about the last couple of minutes. Would you like to, you have any workshops going on now?
I do not.
Or you're just, you're working with youngsters a little bit, are you?
I have been.
Tell me about that a little bit.
Boy, that was working with the New Mexico Youth Authority, working as a psychologist for the state, and what I was seeing was a number of kids who that was their only coping technique, was aggression. Aggression, anger, that's all. And it wasn't that they were really necessarily angry, it was that you could see they had learned that. I talked to kids who'd gone to Springer, and they had learned that. That was a thing that they had learned. I guess the main thing is take care of yourself.
We live in a violent country. Someone was saying that I think in Canada there's about half a dozen murders by firearm, you know, handgun in a year. In the United States, we're just violent country. I don't know if it's because we came out of the frontier. We were all outlaws when we got here. I'm not sure what that is. Yeah. Jim, if you had one little quick piece of advice to men, give it to me in about 15 seconds.
I think the main thing is take care of yourself. And for me, when I get up in the morning, I know there are going to be some things that I have to do that I don't want to do. And I just try to do them the best way that I can.
Thank you very much. Let me thank you all for joining Speaking of Men this evening, this morning, this afternoon, as the case may be. Let me thank Jim Sims for coming down and spending a half hour with us. Let me remind you guys that the whole universe is out of control and we're all going to die. So let's make the most of the little time we have here as a human being. Thank you very much. Thanks again for coming down here and seeing us, Jim.